Who's rolling?
Where do we have the first Minoan funerary customs that we can talk about? What period is it? Pre-palatial period. Okay? When we're looking at pre-palatial funerary customs, what are the Minoans doing around that time?
Was that the communal?
Sorry?
Oh, I know, never mind.
I think you were right.
The communal? Right?
Yes, so we did have communal. Okay? What about how they were being buried? Yep, sorry, you said it? What were assists?
They were essentially a usual plot just surrounded by stones.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pit in the ground with a little bit of stone reinforcement for the walls. Now, pre-palatial period, were they in coffins or not in coffins? Not in coffins. Okay? They were basically thrown into the ground with or without a shroud. Okay? Very, very simple burial. Now, when coffins first start coming about, what are these coffins called? Lineaxes. Okay? What's special about these lineaxes?
They're so small that the body would have had to be in a fetal position to fit in there.
Very good.
So they have to be put away quick.
Yeah, they'd have to be put away quick, the body would be in a fetal position. In later periods, where would Lineaxes be sourced from? Where might you find them from?
Egypt.
Where in a Minoan village or house might you find a Lineaxe? Remembering we talked about this last time, sometimes they use the old bathtub.
Oh yeah.
Okay? Sometimes Nana
So
stays
they
in the
would-
bathtub too long.
You know that's.
Okay?
Maybe that's how they invented it. Someone died in a bathtub and they're like, well, it smells and we don't want to touch her, so just put a lid on it.
Done.
Yeah.
There you
Is
go.
there any significance to the fact that the body was in a fetal position?
So this one is conjecture. There's multiple opinions on it. Some historians believe, and we'll go a bit through it today, that it might have been this sort of connection to rebirth. Yeah. Okay. Or the fact that, you know, like, okay, you're born like this, where you're going to die like that,
but
it all
how-
comes back.
But how they know people like in the womb look like fetuses?
You know, I was thinking about that just the other day, Vivian, and I couldn't get an answer myself.
Oh, maybe when you lose a child.
Maybe.
Child's born that way, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
What a sore hand up then. Okay? So, Lineaxes. Are they common?
No.
Depends on the time period.
It was more common with the labor.
Yes. Okay. What were Lineaxes evidence of in Minoan society?
A wealthy
Good. Okay. So we talked about this and we said that it might have been evidence, using our fancy words rather, of social,
Stratification.
yeah, social stratification, meaning you have levels to society. Upper class, middle class, lower class, nobility, knights, peasants, things like that. Okay? Because some people were being buried in these Lineaxes and some weren't, or the vast majority of them were not being, we have evidence going, oh, okay, maybe only the rich or the important people are getting buried in these Lineaxes. Okay? Did we have any other burial methods? Something you might bury them in?
I was going to say, like a close
I'm sorry, I had no idea what you said then. I couldn't hear it. What did you say?
I kind of things I like half of their questions, like I said, the other forms of burial stuff they were in.
Yeah, so there were other forms of burial. Okay, so we had things like the cyst, the house. Okay? But, yes, so we had the tholos tomb and the ossuary, which are part of the tholos. Okay? Now, what other thing besides the Lineaxe might a person be thrown into that? We had a little bit of a chat about this. Starts with a P. Not a pit. A pithoin.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
jars, the bars.
But are they small? Or do they just
Some are built bigger, and we'll have a look at them as to why you might be able to fit a person in there.
I have a question about the Lineaxes.
Yep.
So you know how they came about in like the later end of the Minoan civilization? Does that mean that like people originally thought it was an egalitarian society? So does that mean that they started having social stratification later
And
on?
this is a key theory that we've looked at. The fact that, okay, early Minoan society might have been a purely egalitarian society. Meanwhile, later Minoan society might have edged its way towards social stratification. Keeping in mind, one of the difficult things about the Lineaxes is the Mycenaeans also used them as well. But for the Mycenaeans, it is definitively a social stratification issue. Okay? Alright. So, let's have a look. Now that one's just going to annoy me, so let's just turn them off.
Oh, the
We'll just turn
brightness
the
on this
aircon off.
projector is so much.
Okay? Now, let's have a look at burial practice. So, the Minoan practice was to bury.
So don't you worry you're gonna cut your hand off one day?
No, I was more worried about dropping the blades on Harsha, but you know.
So should we worry about both?
Alright, so the Minoan practice was to bury one body in each chamber. When all the rooms have been used, a second burial took place in each room, then a third, a fourth, and so on. When a room became crowded with bones, the skulls were collected up and the remaining bones were swept to one side. Further burials would be made until the rooms became too crowded for any more. At this stage, additional rooms could be added to the original tomb, or else a new tomb could be made. Hello.
Oh, good, this way, good. Are we safe?
Okay, thank you. Now, that is an excellent quote from Calendar, basically saying Minoans, as we were saying last lesson, are not shy in touching the dead. Okay? And they are very good at making space. So once your body has rotted enough and you've got enough bodies in the chamber, collect up your bones, we sweep them to the side. We're making room for other people. Okay? We could say that perhaps the Minoans did not treat the bones with as much respect as the flesh, because they might have thought once the flesh is gone, maybe the soul has escaped. And that's not an uncommon belief in ancient societies. Even in modern day Zoroastrian and Altaic religions, you still have this idea that the flesh imprisons the soul. Once the flesh is gone, soul's gone. Okay, that's why in Zoroastrianism you used to bury the bodies outside so the vultures could pick them clean to get the soul out. Okay?
Didn't the Nordic have the same idea with bone removal?
Yeah, it's quite a common idea amongst ancient societies. Okay, and it makes sense when you think about it from their perspective. So we think this might have been why they kept the bones, they sort of just brushed them to the side. Now, did they brush away all parts of the bone?
No, they cut.
They kept the skulls, because that's where they thought, you know, brain, mind, soul, where it might have been. Okay? Now, one of the key words that we have here is what we call an ossuary. Okay? So as discussed before, Minoans were not afraid of moving bodies after they had been inhumed, meaning buried. Often there would be storerooms in the tombs. These chambers were called ossuaries or bone houses. Either one is fine for the HSE. I would prefer ossuary because it's that key terminology word. But if you absolutely cannot remember ossuary, just say bone house. They know what you mean. These could store hundreds of bodies. When these two became too full, all bones besides the skull would be thrown out. So basically, if your storehouse is just too packed, we're throwing out all the bones except for the skull. We're only keeping the bare necessities. Okay?
So I'm pretty sure the archaeologists thought they stumbled across some multi-headed.
There's some
Body.
like some Cerberus
Yeah.
human being or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, ossuaries are not particularly an ancient idea either. We can still find these in France as late as 1800s. Okay? They are still around in certain southern European countries. Malta is an example of one of them where they have certain aspects of ossuaries. Okay? I believe Sicily also has them as well. Okay? So one of the tombs that we look at here is the Isopatho tomb. Okay. Now, although the vast majority of Tholos tombs are simple affairs, can anybody tell me how might be the easiest way to recognise a Tholos tomb? Yes.
It's circular shape.
Circular shape and something else.
The dome on top.
Dome roof, very good. Okay. So although the vast majority of Tholos tombs are simple affairs, the Isopatho tomb is different. Found near Knossos, this tomb had fine construction and a dromos. Now dromos, okay, is an avenue or passage leading into an ancient Greek temple or tomb, especially one between rows of columns or statues. So basically you have a nice little avenue to walk into the tomb with.
How
Okay.
refined.
This tomb had fine construction and a dromos that led to two deep niches in the inner hall that were walled up. These niches contained pottery, human bones and debris. This site was plundered for its masonry, however the bones were found in it, and the lower indicated it functioned from late Minoan 1 to late Minoan 2. Okay? Now, did I, girls, give you a chronology of when all the periods are? Yeah, it was
Probably.
quite a while ago though, yeah?
Refresh us, sir.
Yeah, okay. I've actually got another sheet for you that will probably make it a bit simpler for you. After we finish this PowerPoint, there's a bit of reading for you guys to do, so I'll print it out while you're reading. Okay, because all these letters, they are important. Okay? Alright, so calendars suggest that the large number of bones held within house tombs suggests that each tomb was used by one or two nuclear families over the course of centuries. What do I mean by nuclear families? I don't mean like there's a family of a nuclear bomb, obviously.
Oh, no, so like blood related.
Blood relatives, exactly right. Father, mother, children. Okay? So each one of these house tombs might have been used by two families. Okay? And they're all pouring their bodies into there. Okay? Now these could be used over the course of centuries, which would certainly explain why we find so many corpses and bones there over the course of such a long period of time. Built tombs were accompanied by a small step altar outside. This altar may have had a stone kernos, where offerings could be placed, such as the one found outside the house tombs at Gornia. This can also be found at the Malia Necropolis and Arcane cemeteries. This can be an indication of regular cult practice outside the tombs. Alright, first of all, what's a necropolis?
Big city.
It's a city of... No, because necro means...
Oh, I just said Necropolis.
Yeah.
City.
City of the dead. Okay? So polis, of course, meaning as Flynn said, city of, and necro meaning dead. Okay, so if we have a necropolis, it means a city specifically dedicated to the preservation or burial, things like that, of the dead.
So a giant cemetery.
Effectively a giant cemetery. Okay? So we have these little small altars outside of these tombs. Okay? Effectively what it would be, you have the house tomb. House tomb's effectively just a rectangle with the bodies inside of it. You would have a little shrine that would sit about probably up to your waist level. And then beneath that little shrine, you'd have the kernos. Okay, effectively just another step. Okay, and basically what we think might have happened is you have the shrine here, you have the offerings table here. We think people might have gone up to the tombs, they're paying homage to their dead relatives, things like that, and they've left gifts and things like that to their dead relatives. Okay, that's not really an uncommon thing. Most people will still leave flowers or such by their dead relatives. They'll visit them once every couple of years or so forth. If you're from certain cultures, they will still leave food, drink and money to dead people. So it's not exactly uncommon. But what we have here is this idea of a cult practice and the fact that there might be funerary cults. Cults dedicated specifically to dead people. Okay? So, with each one of these tombs, the family themselves might have been this constant devotees of this tomb, constantly making sure that their families in the afterlife are looked after for these offerings. So, a bit more on Lineaxes, okay? Now, as discussed before, coffins or Lineaxes were not common on Minoan society. However, even with these, there could be as many as 10 corpses inside them. That's what I'm saying. Those Lineaxes, they're not just for one person sometimes. You might be stuffing a whole family in there. Additionally, Lineaxes such as the Aegea Triada sarcophagus could be reused with previous bodies' bones being placed elsewhere. So even if you had a coffin, they could actually get that coffin, take you out of it, okay, you're just bones now, and then put another body in there to decompose. Okay? Now, one of the important things is quite often with these Lineaxes, things like that, is they are not buried. Okay? They are put in tombs above ground. So you can see them, you can walk up to them, you can touch them.
So does that mean it smells?
So, yeah, it probably smells atrocious. Okay? I was also just thinking, like, if they're throwing out the previous people, you're probably going to have to actually tip over the Lineax and get out all the bodily fluids that are probably accumulated there.
Ew.
Okay? It's probably a bit juicy.
Ew.
Ew, don't say it like that.
Sir, don't do that.
No, ugh.
I'm so sorry. I said that in the inappropriate manner. It would have been very juicy. So you would have felt the juice just bubbling in the Lineax. Very juicy.
Oh, I'm beyond disgusted right now.
I told you it wouldn't stop when he got unelected. Alright. So good. Alright, so during Minoan times, Lineaxes were quite rare. However, during the Mycenaean occupation, they became increasingly popular. So if you're seeing a cemetery with heaps and heaps of Lineaxes, you might actually be looking at a Mycenaean cemetery rather than a Minoan cemetery. The Mycenaeans loved these ideas of these Lineaxes and coffins. Minoans either couldn't afford it or it just wasn't part of their major part.
Is it possible that the Minoans adopted the idea of Lineaxes from the Mycenaeans?
So it is possible. I would say because we're seeing Lineaxes so long before the Mycenaean occupation, I would say it's quite possible that it's the other way around. The Mycenaeans adopted it off the Minoans. It's not impossible what you're saying, that they've got the idea from the mainland Greece and are taking it from the Mycenaeans, but I would think it's more the other way around. Okay? So, the other one that we're talking about is Pithoi coffins. Okay? Now, these Pithoi being those ceramic vases that we were looking at when we were doing Thera and Santorini. Okay? Now, Pithoi burials were a far more common form of burial privacy. Okay? When we're looking at burial privacy, what did we say that might be evidence of in Minoan society? Why might they be more and more concerned with their privacy when they're being buried? Changing religious attitudes, absolutely. All this idea that maybe I'm an individual and I don't want to be buried with 10 other people.
Yeah.
Okay? So we look at Pithoi burials and we go, ooh, maybe this is an example of individualism rising in Minoan society. This breakaway from this sort of communal, egalitarian society.
Or they had COVID.
Or they had COVID, yeah.
No
There
social
was
distancing.
There was social distancing, even the bodies. Because
Yeah.
they just couldn't be, more cautious
Yeah,
enough.
he probably died of COVID. They
Yeah.
didn't want anyone to contract it. Pop him in a pot,
This is like COVID negative 50, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
You can't have like COVID zombies running around.
Exactly, yeah, they're being safe. They're being smart.
listen, you can't have COVID zombies running around. You don't know. They start off in Minoan Crete. They could end up in China for all you know. You just don't know. All right. So, in earlier times, it was largely only used for small children. That's right.
I'll hop around the back.
It was
Actually, go for it.
largely only used for small children. However, became more common in the middle and late Minoan periods. So we know that, for example, in the ancient world, infant mortality rate is quite high. Okay? If your child, a lot of the children are not going to survive till the age of 2.
Oh.
Okay, I think it's something along the lines of 30 to 50% of children will die before they get to the age of 2.
Oh.
So you do have a lot of infantile bodies. Okay, now these Pithoid coffins would have been the perfect space for them. Okay, they're not relatively big, and the baby can sort of fit into those. Okay, however, we look at it as we get later and later into Minoan thing. You have bigger Pithoid being built, and adult corpses are going in them as well. Okay, Brannigan in 1970 suggests that this is because individualism began creeping into Minoan society. However, Wahlberg posits, do we know what posit means?
Suggests, gives their opinion.
Suggests or gives opinion, very
I
good.
will use that in English.
Yes.
Thank you.
However, Wahlberg posits that it was merely a more efficient and cleaner way to store the dead. So if you didn't have a Lineaxe, well, you could certainly have a Pithoid, and it was a much easier way of basically just stacking the dead people up and cleaner.
I feel like Britain could learn from this.
Feel like Britain could learn from this?
Yeah.
See, it's an interesting question in our own society, because I know in England, and including here, there's a lot of Catholic and Islamic cemeteries that are joining now. Because in both religions, it's important to bury the body, not burn it or sort of just get rid of it. And they're finding less and less space in modern society to actually bury their dead.
Yes.
Alright, so other historians have suggested that Minoan bodies were often buried in their position as it was reminiscent of being in a womb-like status. Obviously, I did not find a source. Okay? Genius.
It's okay.
I believe it was from Calendar himself. Yes.
I think the idea, he's talking about like merging
What do you think of the voting list?
cemeteries. I think the idea of Viking burials, where I was saying salting the house through smoke, is a pretty cool way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's cleaner, safer. I mean, hey, it's a pretty cool light show.
I don't think you were going to convince the Catholic and Islamic sects to burn their bodies.
It can
I have
be
a
done.
solution.
Yeah.
Bury us in pots. Put some
Bury
dirt
us
in
in
there.
pots?
Put some dirt in there. Put my body in there.
Well, that's
close
what
the
Flynn
pot.
was saying. It's the more efficient solution.
Let's just
No,
Grow
grow
some
Flynn-
flowers on top and just put it
Yeah,
in the
grow some
house.
flowers. Make me useful for the environment.
You can actually be buried in a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be buried in a tree.
All right.
I'll
So,
put that in my will.
Mr. Beast kind of technique.
there we are. So one of the last ones that we're looking at is this idea of chamber tombs. Now, after the Mycenaeans' occupation, tombs became smaller and more individualistic. Okay, so there's more of them, but they're smaller. But you have this much more unique feel around each one as well. There is a clear evidence of social stratification in these tombs, which were used by the warrior elite. So it's very obvious in Mycenaean tombs who the powerful people in society were. Okay, and they were celebrating this fact that they were great warriors and things like that. Because Mycenaean culture is primarily a warrior culture. Can anybody remember the Mycenaean word for king?
Minos.
Not Minos? Wanax.
Oh.
Because you
Wa-
remember that we see the word Wanax in one of the Linear B tablets. And it's one of those things that make us go, ooh, did the Minoans have a king? Did they have a Wanax as well? And that's sort of one of the things that Evans really jumped onto for the idea of priest-king. Okay, or Wanax or Wanax. Okay.
So don't change it yet, please. Please.
Now these were cut into rock in the hillside and a dromos led down to the chamber. Hillside. Why is that important compared to the Minoan Tholos tombs? Were Minoan tombs cut into the hillside? Above the ground, okay? Only things like the cysts were below the ground. Your tholos and things like that were all above ground on flat ground. So it's one of the easier ways to tell the difference between the different tombs, whether it's Mycenaean or Minoan. If it has been cut into the hillside, this is a Mycenaean idea. If it is above the flat ground, it's a Minoan idea. Okay?
What is that chamber?
It's meant to be chamber.
Okay.
It's my special spelling, leave me alone.
You know, you flew in gibberish. You've implemented it here. Very good.
Yeah, so speaking sins.
Alright, so where did I leave those readings? I hope not. But I did.
Hey, look, maybe you can write all the time.
What were they? So just printouts?
Yeah, they'll just print out, sir, but that's alright. I will quickly just.
I don't mind. I'm happy to swing down.
I'm actually not too sure where I've left them on the desk, sir. Is that it?
So can I wrap up the reporting?
No, because we're still going to be going. Just
What?
actually just hit talk down.
Yeah.
Yeah.